I need you all to do two things for me during this presentation. So first thing is, does anyone know the rule of thumb when you open up a fortune cookie and you read the insert inside and you read it to yourself, what you finish that statement off with? Does anyone know that rule? The two words are in bed. So if you open up a fortune cookie and it says, good fortune will come to you, say in your head, in bed. It never fails, it's fantastic. So throughout my presentation, I need you to think of every statement I say and finish it off for the red meat livestock industry. Because I'm going to make some statements that won't be true about cropping, won't be true about horticulture, but they're definitely true about the industry that I represent. And the other thing I think I need you all to remember too is a lot of what I'm about to present on now is something we started approximately 12 months ago. And once again, they're very, very true statements 12 months ago. We're still living this out. Just remember the world moves on quite a long way in 12 months. So definitely some of the statements when I talk about solution providers wouldn't work with us. I think the world's moved on in the last 12 months. And you can probably get a bit of a feel for where I'm heading with some of those statements. So let's start with why do we do some of this? Why is MLA focused on these activities? And without doubt, there's got to be producer benefits on farm, otherwise you wouldn't do it. But we actually think there's a bigger picture. And here's an example of a video, hopefully it'll play, hopefully we'll get sound, of how consumers in Europe are starting to engage at retail end and what they're being offered from a technology perspective. So I've been to this supermarket, it does exist. There's two of them in Italy. In essence, every part of that supermarket you go to where you pick up a product, as you pick up the product, the TV screens are telling you about that product. Could be how to cook it, could be the origin, could be food miles, could be something about the producer. Now, I don't know behind the scenes how much of that's smoke and mirrors. I've got no idea at all. Okay? But it is an insight into how European consumers are starting to think about how they make food choices at the point in retail about making those food choices. And from our perspective, that's one of the reasons why we need digital agriculture supply chains here in Australia. Because definitely for the sector I represent, Europe pays quite a nice price for the product that we send over there. And if we can't feed into the way that these retail technologies are working with information from our supply chain, it will be either a way that we're discounted or not considered at all. So definitely one of the reasons why MLA's got a program in this area, it's not just to improve producer profitability and sustainability, it's to make sure we can keep having market access globally and hopefully charge a premium for our product. Here's actually, we've built a couple of these modules. Here's our old MD who jumped ship and went to the Red Company and left me high and dry, bastard. And I mean that with the utmost respect. He was a good friend of mine and I wasn't ready for him to leave. But anyway, and Minister Little Proud, looking at, we built a couple of these modules. For one, for red meat that we had at our AGM last year. And we had this running. We'll keep trucking it around to conferences such as this. I just didn't have time to get it ready for this. So you get a bit of a feel for why this is important. At the moment, I'll be honest, what drives this from our prototype here is smoke and mirrors, because we don't have a connected, digitally enabled supply chain in the red meat industry in Australia. And that's what we're trying to change. And it gives you an example of some of the things that we can show up. So, you know, they're real images, they're real prices, but we actually don't know whether it's come from that production property or not. Okay, so there's some of the things that we're trying to change by enabling a digital world. Also, I don't know if anyone's seen this. We're now doing some work with the company that developed this interactive label. This is from Treasury Estates, so the people that make grains. And this is some labelling. You can buy this product in Australian stores today. It's been available for about 18 months. And it's just another way, once again, that consumers can interact with the product that we all produce as producers. And that it is impossible for mind or body. I'll just play a little bit of this so you get a bit of a feel. So you download an app on your phone. One or the other. You get creepy music like that. My daughter loves the creepy music.
Some may call me traitor, others hero. But I I call myself Michael Harrington.
So as a consumer, that app costs you nothing. Obviously, the bottle of wine costs you something. And depending on what label you hold it over, depends on what story you get. And I think, if I remember correctly, the 19 Crimes talks about the different crimes that you could have been sent to Australia for in the convict times.
For crimes against the crown.
So once again, if we've got a digitally enabled supply chain, we could have interactive labels on our meat offerings that actually could talk about where that meat came from, talk about the producer. How do we connect city consumers, whether they be in Australia or not, back to farm stories here in Australia? How does MLA, through these sorts of smart labels, convey our environmental credentials, for example, or other sector credentials? So we're now working with the developers of this and trying to come up with a meat pilot. And what we're doing is connecting all that together in this supermarket of the future concept. So we're now walking around these two modules, one for meat, one for wine, and trying to get this interactive labelling happening, just to show how all this throughput can happen. The other reason it's important for consumers, and I'm going to get onto technology eventually, I will acknowledge that. MLA announced that it's driving with the industry a carbon neutrality program for 2030. The way that you measure that at the moment is a survey for a property that takes about 6 or 7 hours to fill in. All of the questionnaire, if you had a tag on every animal, if you had weather stations across your property, if you had a range of other things that we saw in the AgriWeb offering, all of a sudden that survey becomes automatic. So once again, if MLA wants to work with the producers to show that we've got a carbon neutral industry, which is good for consumers, which we can display through those interactive products or at retail, how do you actually make the back end of that seamless? Because it's 6 hours to fill out a survey. There's no incentive for a producer to do that at the moment. And then finally, and then let's get into some technology. The other thing that the red meat industry is doing, it's got a thing called the Beef Sustainability Framework. Now, sustainability here, if you can see up there, is more than just environment. So it talks about slave labour. It talks about efficient supply chains, about profits being shared up and down the supply chain, not just about what you would typically think environmental sustainability is. Without doubt, every one of those we can probably digitally monitor, enable and convey. We've just released our latest version of where we think that's up to as a snapshot. It took a lot of hours and it's done at a very top-down level. What we would love to see is if we had every producer connected with the right number of widgets in paddock, then this becomes a true bottom-up representation of our industry, and we think a really powerful message for consumers globally that will pay a premium. Okay, let's get into it. So we asked ourselves this question approximately this time last year. Is this digital agriculture stuff, remember the fortune cookie thing, in the red meat livestock industry, hype, or is it happening? We saw lots of media about virtual fencing, walkover weighing, smart animal tags, you name it, you could read about it in the media. When I was going to properties, I wasn't seeing any of it. So, and this is the sort of thing that our producers were seeing in the media.
A dairy cow that talks to farmers. What kind of sorcery is that? It's not the magic wand kind. It's the RFID collar and Internet of Things kind we created with Chitley Dairy. So every cow can let farmers know how she feels and what she needs to be healthier. All with a simple text. Ta-da! Magic can't make digital transformation happen, but we can. That's the power of VMware, part of Dell Technologies.
So ta-da, all done. Far from all done. And the two problems that this caused me, and this is me being woe is me, I'll acknowledge that, is either producers sending me a nasty email saying, why is MLA investing in all this stuff because it's all done, look at it. Or producers sending me an email saying, I've seen this, why is MLA not involved and I want it tomorrow. That's the problem that was being caused by not through any malice, I get the way the business models work, but that was the problem that MLA had in front of it. So what we decided to do as a team, and we blew our budget big time, is to say, and this was, we thought, a really big budget, if you think about what a producer is able to spend every year. We said, why don't we set ourselves a $50,000 budget? Why don't we find a host site that's got a bit of an open mind and a forward-looking attitude? And why don't we invite all of the global solution providers we're aware of to come and put their kit in, and we'll see how we go and we'll see what is doable for the red meat livestock industry. This is a property. It's a group of 4 properties with a professional general manager that's ran that group for the last 21 years, and they used to have a northern territory property as well. So he's got a fairly good handle over the last 20 years of different properties Australia-wide and different sizes. And he's also got his own private property that he runs that we included in the program as well. So Darren Price, this guy's so good. He only beat me up a couple of times. I was so impressed with him. We've now got him on our books one day a week just to help us see the Carwilla project through, because it's not been easy. Hopefully, yep, here's the summary of their 4 property groups plus one. So Darlin is his private property. The other 4 are the properties in that professional pastoral group, based around Canberra. So we've got a couple just on the outskirts of Canberra, 30-minute drive, and we've got one in Yass. So you can see an interesting range of property sizes. Beef and sheep, some are just beef, and on one of the properties he's got a couple of pivots just for fodder. So not a bad property place, not a bad property group to have a go at this stuff on. So we put that out to global solution providers and effectively said, come and play with us. That's what we ended up with. We've got printouts of this, which I can hand out. They're in the car. I forgot to bring them in. But in essence, we installed over 200 devices across those 5 properties. And it's probably fair to say that there wouldn't be one solution provider up there that hasn't been back multiple times to fix something or rip it out over the last. And we did the install in October, November last year. Now, I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's a fact of life. The other thing that was really interesting is the number of times we had to educate those installation teams who all claimed they could do this in the red meat livestock industry, that when you put something in a paddock on a livestock property, there's a chance a cow or a sheep might come and look at it and play with it. The number of times we had exposed cables, the number of times we had poles put in the ground where if I leant on them, they would fall over, was horrendous. So for us, and keep in mind, let's put in context, this is 12 months ago, and I'm not having to go to any of our solution providers. They've been great to work with because they've all learnt. And I think that's the power of these programs and the program that you're talking about running down here. And it's a really hard space for solution providers at the moment because they don't have enough ground traction at the moment to truly do what we want them to do. But at the same time, we've got to cut them a bit of slack and give them that ground truthing opportunity. So really keen to see what you're doing here. It's fantastic. So we reached out to 150 global solution providers that we were aware of back then and said, this is what we're doing, come and play, show us what you've got. You've all put in the media that you can do something for our industry. 40 responses. Of those 40, about 15 said, got your email, we're just not ready for various reasons. So pat on the back for them. They were honest about it. The 25 that said, yes, we can do something, we took to property for an inspection day, and about 5 bailed once we knew we were going to install them with their competition. So we had a water tank, and we said, we'll put every single water sensor that comes to us on that one water tank and compare you against each other. A couple said, no, we're not interested, we're not going to play that game. So we ended up with about 20. And I think we've got about 17 left, so a few have removed themselves. So a good range, and you've got quite a few of them here or outside with Tapari, and on balance, they've all been great to work with. The other thing that we forced all of these companies to do was give up their output data, so not their smarts, not their algorithms, but if you put a weather station in and it said 25 degrees Celsius, they had to give that up to everybody else in this group, so people could put it on their own web portals, phone apps, use it, whatever it was. Even that was interesting, because when we said that was part of the terms and conditions, all the sales guys, and sometimes they were the technical guys as well, all the sales guys said, yeah, not a problem, we'll do that. It was interesting being blind copied into some of the technical emails about how these APIs don't actually work that seamlessly. So just be really careful for those challenges, and it's something I request that the Shire does here, and I know you're doing it, is you force all that data to go up to a common point so people can leverage it. One of the disappointing things for us, finishing the sentence because we're looking for livestock solutions, is the lack of walkover weighing that was available. The lack of what we're calling smart animal tags. They just didn't exist. Really disappointing. No virtual fencing came to the market. One of them actually came and said, although we've been talking about it in the media, we're not ready, we can't help you. No, hardly any drone companies came to the table when we actually said we want more than just a pretty picture, and you've heard a couple of presentations about that recently. No advanced feeding systems. We had one guy come and talk to us about electric dirt bikes, which we thought would be interesting to put up against the petrol ones. I think that was all too early for them as well. And this was really surprising, even though we proactively reached out to a couple of high-end suppliers, no one came with what we call any advanced pivot solutions on monitoring or anything like that. And we've actually dummied up some of our own. one of the learnings for us, once again, this is 12 months old. I've got an engineering background. I'm not in the technical detail anymore. As Hugh introduced me, I'm just a wanker that works in an office. Okay, so I'm not involved in the technical stuff anymore. So you may laugh when I say what I'm about to say. I did not realise 12 months ago you can't just buy a $200 rain gauge sensor and install it. You've actually probably got to put in anywhere between $7,000 and $10,000 or $20,000 worth of LoRaWAN or Sigfox or connectivity towers as a sweeping statement. So that was a real eye-opener for us. And the other thing, my background is Cobden Camperdown, Victoria, working for a company that used to be called Bond Lake Foods in their dairy factories. I'm used to being involved in $30, $40, $50 million capital expenditure programs and could read those quotes quite comfortably. I had trouble reading $20,000 quotes from some of these suppliers, trying to understand what the hell they were talking about. And then on one of them, we managed to find there was back-end data charges that all the others had hidden from us. So we've learned so much in the last 12 months, and hopefully producers in this room get the benefit of that because they know, solution providers know they can't hide that from us anymore. They know how to install stuff, and we'll take the solution providers in this region that supply this region up another level as well. And that's why the pilot that the Shire is doing around here is absolutely fantastic, and we support it. And Hugh baited me quite well because we will support it financially as best we can. Just a range of installation, different techniques and types. Like I said, there was not one company where we didn't have to actually tell them, either before they did an installation or after they did an installation, that either they were going to have to come back within a week or two and replace it because an animal was going to go through it, or they had to think of a different way of protecting it. Now, one of the companies has put up such a big tower to get coverage with such big guide wires that they then expected the farm manager to fence off a 30 metre by 30 metre paddock of prime pasture. So we've just said to them, well, you've given us a 3-year guarantee, expect to come back and replace it. So, and then the other thing with the solution providers, and it feels like I'm bagging them, but they've come a long way, so just be ready for it if you're a producer. The number of times they ask to borrow tools, which I think is just absolutely ridiculous. There's no way as an engineer I would go to a factory and not take my own tools. I love all our solution providers and we keep working with them and they're still with us, don't get me wrong, so please don't take the wrong message. I'm just sharing the learnings we've had over the last 12 months. The other thing is, within reason, most widget solution provider had their own app. So the other thing we were really mindful of in the early days is we acknowledge that they all need their own apps because you might just buy from them. Their app might be the way you configure alarms, for example. But we all wanted them to offer that data up to feed into the agri-webs of the world, for example. So that was something that we were very, very focused on as well. And that space is getting better and better. What's really interesting for us is what is the value proposition. So I remember I said we had a $50,000 budget. We blew 420. So we spent 420 grand. Now we did that, we didn't have to do that. One of the reasons why we did that, we were actually in some ways disappointed with the types of widgets that came to us, but we were pleasantly surprised at the number of people that came with the same types of solutions. So we had 4 or 5 companies offering rain gauges, 4 or 5 companies offering soil probes, so on and so on. And what we decided to do was, rather than just do all this work on one of the 4 properties, we did it on all 5. So consciously, effectively, we multiplied that budget by 5, which is sort of roughly where we fit in the end, and a few other things, just so we could really give everyone a good chance to demonstrate what they could or couldn't do. What's the value proposition? I think it's still a tough one to justify if in your head you really don't want to do it. I still think this is a very emotive reason to do this as an end user and fit for your business and not anybody else's. So I think if you had someone doing that analysis with you that didn't want you to invest in this space, it'd be very easy for them to show you why you shouldn't invest. And I think for the next few years, and I think this is why there's a role for MLA and your Shire here to keep doing, and AgVic for what they're doing, is we've got to get it out there so people can experience it and get their own value proposition for their own business. So for this farm, and this is a farm of only 2,000 hectares, the homestead farm, the first aha moment for that general manager was just the ability to see all his water troughs and his dams. Now, for me, that's not an aha moment, but for him, with the way he runs his business, with the way he's got it staffed, that's gold to him. For somebody else, that might not be worth anything. And the other one is, although we didn't have a great offering of smart animal tags, there's a company called IDS who actually found us. They weren't in our 150 call out, who we think are really good at what they do around animal tags. They are only at a certain level. They need to be improved, and they're working on that program with us. But that those two images on the right, mind you, are of different paddocks. Same technology. The first one just tells you where the animal is right now, or it tells you within the last hour. I apologise. You can do it more frequently than that, but then you run out of batteries faster. And the bottom one is really the snail trail of where those animals have been. So it's really interesting. I'm going to make 2 points here, or probably 3 points. Point one is really interesting information to see that they're not using all of that paddock. But now, having seen that, which this producer would never have known, now it takes time to work out, and here's the key, so what, and do you care? And that's such a big amount of time that we've now put Darren Price on our books 1 day a week. So we're effectively, from the people that employ him, we've said, we think it's important for you to know that as a business, but you've been running your business the way you've been running it for the last 20 or 30 years, so it's probably a value add if it's a value add at all. But we actually think it's going to take someone 1 day a week to start taking this information that knows something about your business for the last 20 years and answers the so what factor question. And I think that's one of our other challenges in this space as well. A lot of the trials that MLA is doing with our smart farms, with what you're about to do up here, the key is we've got to generate this data, make sure the widgets that go in are robust, and that's just time, effort and environmental conditions. And then how do we make the resources available for people, especially the farm owners or the farm managers, to answer the so what question? And I reckon that's another 2 to 3 years in front of us to answer some of those questions. Just a little plug for what we're doing next. We're about to run an immersive reality conference in Melbourne in, 10th and 11th of July. What's the link here? We've got all the RDCs involved. We've got some pretty high-end speakers presenting at it. I'm just going to show you a screenshot from Saab Technology. So Saab, the car manufacturer, who doesn't manufacture any cars anymore, but still manufactures fighter jets and all those other sexy things. Sorry, I keep pointing there. So that chart or that image on the right is what they use Google Glass for at the moment, developing planning strategies with the with I'm assuming it's the US military, because when they took us in and did this with us a few weeks ago, they used Hawaii as Hawaii's been overrun. How do you work out where your planes go and your tanks go and your people go? The reason why we're starting to get into this space is I think this is part of digital ag, whether it be finding a weed on your phone app, or where we think it's going is we can throw as many sensors out there as you want, gate sensors, whatever you want. That's a lot of information you're not used to seeing. We can put it on a 2D screen. Yep. On a phone app, you can only see so much. On an iPad, you can see a bit more. We're at Darren's place at Kawula, got some really big TV screens. That's another level of information you can see. We think by putting glasses on, actually seeing your farm come to 3D life and instantly seeing a red gate open, or a red dot on an animal, say it's not healthy. We think that's going to be a really different way to see more of that data faster. So just letting you know, all of the RDC, so MLA is an RDC, so all of the RDCs are driving this conference in July. Encourage you to come. We are about to run our first pilot with Saab at Kawula. If that works well, then I'd love for Saab to come and show you what they can do on a couple of the properties around here, and just let's say what value add does that give us. One quick last thing. I'm just going to play a video, which we might not get all the way through of, and we're about to do our second edit of this. This is our first edit, which I'm not 100% happy of. If we can get all this to work, how does it all start to look?
Coffee is ready.
Morning.
Morning, Tony. How are you?
And I'll talk over it. So effectively, it's with the concept of, and this is happening in one area in China. I don't know the right definition for area in China. In essence, people are getting social kudos scores.
You're a bit low in iron though.
Oh, yeah.
So if you walk a lot,
so
you get
I'm
cheaper
gonna
health
increase that red
insurance.
meat intake
If you make good food choices, you get better credit ratings.
Hello, children.
Effectively, if you're nasty to someone, your food price goes up. It's all that sort of thinking. How do you make
Okay,
I behave differently with the choices they make? So it's called a social kudos score.
In dinner, right? Because you need lots of energy. You've got your swimming finals coming up. You've got lots of training.
So this was all, the prompt I gave for, and we'll make this available, the prompt I gave for the design team and my researchers in-house is I said, I want to hear everything that we're doing that might be possible in the future. So everything that's in this video, we're either working on or we know someone else is. So DNA to work out what you should or shouldn't eat. urinating in smart toilets to say what's your glucose levels like, all those sorts of things. So we just sort of cherry pick some of those things that we know are evolving. Do they ever come to reality? We don't know. And starting to effectively say, as this walks back, unless we keep measuring more and more on our farms and through our supply chain, we will not be able to support this sort of future. And the question is, one, will this future ever exist? And number two, if it does Australia want to be part of it or left out of it?
So what I'm going to do is, the cattle have already been selected for those, so the best cuts of meat. I'll take the gator out and go round them up.
No worries. Just looking here, 42. Calcium, magnesium.
It's the concept of our smart glasses. Like I said, we're starting to, when I say deploy that now, we're starting to do pilots in that work at the moment.
Data. We could do that, but the data's actually saying remove them into 65 and finish.
The other thing with those smart glasses, if you're Darren Price and you're monitoring 4 locations, how do you do more meaningful team meetings with people on your remote sites? By actually bringing up what's happening on that site in a 3-dimensional way rather than trying to do it via email or over phone. Anyway, you get the gist. In the interest of time, we'll make that available. We're about to do a future iteration, but this is sort of what's driving our decisions at the moment about why we're supporting some of these programs. And Hugh, to your point, I know you baited me, but I know we've already had the chat. MLA is definitely keen to support what you guys are doing in this area and be a part of it.